See Angie.
Good to see you. All right, so I've heard from a few people they can't make it today. I think it might be a busy time for folks, or maybe it just always is a busy time for people. But if you have if you can turn your webcam on, it might be a more intimate group today. And in fact, so Shasta can't make it. And then Serena, who's kind of part of our team, couldn't make it today either. And it's okay. We're going to have maybe a little bit more of a conversational meeting anyways. We don't have a speaker today, but I actually think it's good for us to just talk amongst ourselves a little bit every once in a while. We'll bring speakers in next time. We're going to kind of check in a little bit on our progress, what we've learned so far, and have a little bit more of just sort of a discussion. I want to say sorry for last time. I realized afterwards, I thought I was sharing my screen the whole time. So I was saying things that were complicated, and apparently I wasn't sharing my screen. I was just looking at it, not sharing it. So I'll try not to do that this time. You all can see my screen, right? All right, cool. So I'm gonna just go ahead and we're gonna do things slightly differently today, just to obviously remind you all while we're here, we're exchanging knowledge on priority tribal adaptation and resilience data needs. And we usually share tools, practices, ideas, and lessons learned. Today's going to be more of like a, hey, synthesizing what we've learned so far kind of day. I thought since we might be a smaller group, why don't we kind of combine this introduction? We don't need to do it over chat, and do more, like spend a little more time in roundtable updates, and everybody share just a little piece of maybe something that they're working on related to tribal climate and health adaptation, and specifically in data if you can, and we'll just learn a little bit more about what everybody's working on. And then I'll share a little bit about an update on what we're doing with our Tribal Climate Health Project, SoCal Data Development Project. We're gathering some new data sets. It's kind of interesting. I'll just share it with you, and then we'll spend most of our time on this sort of group check-in, and we're going to check back in on what objectives we said we were going to try to achieve as a group, where we're at today, and what some next steps might be. And if we get done early, great. Everybody can have some time in life back. Does that sound good? Okay, and then I'm looking for more speakers for the future, so be thinking of that too, like who else you might be recommending. I have some people in mind, but be interested in your thoughts. Okay, so let's just kind of roll into member announcements. And why don't we do this as sort of round robin? So whoever wants to kind of go first, just remind us who you are, what organization you're with, and if you wouldn't mind, any updates from your point of view, anything you're working on that's related that you just want to share with the group. We'll learn a little bit more about what each of us is working on. So again, I'm Angie Hacker, Tribal Climate Health Project. You're going to hear a little bit more about what I'm working on in the next slide. Anybody want to go?
I'll go. I'm Laurie Montana. I work for OEHA, which is part of Cali, PA, and I've been working with tribes documenting the impacts of climate change. And our big report, which we were supposed to release in the fall, might actually get released next month. It's got to go through review at Cali, PA, so hopefully that'll get done. And the tribal reports, I think, are lovely, especially that they're each very different because they were all guided by the tribes. And so they each give you a different look into what climate impacts tribes in different areas are seeing and what important things the climate change is impacting. And the other thing that we have that I'm interested, if anybody knows where we should go for it, is OEHA has some money to do pesticide education training. So like if you are exposed to pesticides, what do you do? What do you look for? Who do you report it to? Originally, we were aiming at physicians, and we're going to be instead focusing with different tribal environmental professionals. So if you guys have any ideas for where or who to contact for that, other than CRIB and Indian Health, which we've contacted, let me know. Thanks.
Pesticides. I'm going to ask Josh because he oversaw a tribal pollution prevention program. He sort of developed one, and he may know. We have some context there that might be useful.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Anybody else? have ideas, recommendations for Laurie? Okay. All right. Who wants to go next?
I'm happy to go. Just a couple of updates. So I am Chaz, and I work for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. I'm the interim director of the climate change program and their senior tribal liaison. I have an analogous position in the Southwest that is being hired for, but I heard that they had a failed search.
Yeah.
And so they weren't able to fill their first tribal liaison position, but they do have 2 positions open, but they didn't, I don't know the details.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure about why it failed exactly, but just thought I'd offer you that update. In the Northwest, I am hiring, I actually just extended an offer yesterday for my assistant liaison. And so they accepted. We'll be starting in a month. So that's really exciting. We have our tribal climate camp that we host each year, and we're doing that in Alaska this year. We're finishing up that agenda and are getting ready to reopen. We don't have enough tribes from the Northwest that's participating, so we're getting ready to reopen that 2 tribes in the Northwest and trying to fill those slots available. And then we're also just now initiating planning for our Tribal Leadership Climate Change Summit, which I anticipate will be in the fall, probably the late fall. But that's a little bit about what we're working on most recently. And Angie, did Noah reach out to you about your July event?
No, did you say Nidus?
Yeah, Noah, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. They are looking at hosting a drought-related meeting, climate change and drought and health impacts, sometime this summer. And I just told them that you were doing something comparable, and that I shared with them your draft, just kind of your announcement. But I just wanted to see if they had reached out to you, because they were very interested, and there's a lot of overlap, but they're wanting to do theirs in the Northwest.
Well, that would be awesome, because I was actually thinking I wanted somebody from NOAA to participate. So that's perfect. Thank you for doing that. Maybe I can, I haven't heard, so maybe I can follow up with you offline.
Yeah, Britt Parker is the primary contact on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for thinking of us. And yeah, we do have our summit coming. I'm going to put the link in the chat for the summit announcement, which is just to save the date at this point. And we are looking for maybe 2 more speakers. We're still looking for 1 more researcher and somebody else to kind of flesh out a federal or state perspective outside of California on a couple of sessions. All right, who'd like to go next?
So, hi, I'm Sharon Hasam, and I'm new to this group. I was on the call last time, but I was driving, so it's nice to meet people and see faces at the same time. I work for the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I wear 2 hats, as a planner and as a researcher, but my background has been working for tribes for about 20 years. I worked for tribal governments directly. So I'm here because I did a lot with tribal data as a planner during that time period, and I also worked on the Pueblo Laguna's vulnerability assessment for health and wellness. And I think that, I don't know that I have any major updates, but Angie, I also sent you some information on some potential speakers. I think they were CDC folks. It was a circuitous route for some names, but just making sure that you got that for your July Tribal Climate and Health Summit.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We actually have 2 people from CDC already, I think, booked to come from that unit. So thank you. And some of you did respond with some really good suggestions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it started off with me checking in with my colleague at South Central CASC, who's working on inland harmful algal blooms, which is
Ah.
a new approach to harmful, or not a new approach to harmful algal blooms, but of course coastal algal blooms are being discussed, but there's more bubbling up about inland, but she wasn't ready to present on it in
Darn.
July. So that
Okay.
was how we got the CDC folks. But down the road, that may be something to talk about more with freshwater and inland harmful algal blooms. as
Yeah,
a
that's
help.
exactly the kind of thing we're hoping for with our latest research segment, is like, what's
Yeah.
new, something that people haven't heard over and over again at all these conferences. What new thing are we learning? Okay, well, in the future, that'd be great. Thanks,
Right,
Sharon.
I will and let you know when she's ready for that, but also just on demographics and things like that. So everybody's aware, that's part of my background is tribal demographic data. So good to see everyone. I am gonna unvideo for a minute and just be on the phone, but nice to be here.
Great. I'd like to go next.
Go. Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a graduate student at UC Berkeley. I'm studying environmental health sciences. I'm also I wear a couple hats. I'm also a graduate student assistant at a WEHA. I'm working with the State Water Board to look at domestic well systems, state small systems, and tribal water systems, and how to incorporate tribal systems into the SAFER program without any sovereignty concerns of, which I know is wrapped up in the water board. And I'm working on a capstone project that is proposing a methodology based on publicly available data to look at tribal water systems and risk, including drought risk. And I also work for the Othering and Belonging Institute doing climate justice. So a couple of different things.
You know, I'm really glad you're here because we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I think you are working right in the area where I see one of the biggest data gaps.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's have that conversation more. Maybe you can point me to something specific that I can, if you know something specific that I can help tribal community, tribal practitioners use, that would be amazing because I feel like what's out there, what I'm trying to point them to is just not good enough. Okay, thank you. So who wants to go next?
Next. I'm Isabel Cortez. I am an epidemiologist with the County of San Diego. And I work in the Community Health Statistics Unit along with my boss, Chris O'Malley. I also work with Joanne Julian in the Office of Health Equity, although for more arm length, we're on the data side. Now, Chris and I recently presented on some of the dashboards that are available that are sort of broadly of interest in terms of health equity, poverty, racism as a public health issue. We're also part of the excessive heat response plan task force or work group, depending on who happens to be talking the first that day. And one of the things we're getting ready to do is our seasonal kickoff. Of course, that affects everybody in San Diego County. But that's one of the things that is we're available to help with the tribal members as needed in terms of, having sites for cool zones and so forth. But we work broadly across the county in all areas. We recently released our first non-Hispanic Native American health brief. And we're currently working on a 5-year roll-up, which will provide more information for at the county level, so not at the tribe level, or below county geographics. That will be morbidity and death across a number of indicators, including chronic disease, behavioral health, injury, communicable disease, and so forth. And we hope that'll be available along with a dashboard later in the year. And one thing that, and we kind of say that usually fades into the background, that if people are interested in local data or want to reach out to us with data requests, We also field data requests quite frequently across all sorts of things, including economic and demographic data and mapping. And so if there's something that could be more behind the scenes collaborative, we're open to that as well. Because sometimes, we're focused on pushing stuff out publicly, but not everything has to go that way. A lot of times we work with community organizations or groups that have very specific asks, and we're perfectly ready and willing to help any of our tribal members, our residents.
I feel like with CDPH here, this is making me think, it would be so nice to showcase San Diego, what you all are doing in San Diego as an example of how counties could possibly be supporting tribes better, just as a case, use case or an example. But thank you. And I haven't forgot about our previous conversation. I'm about to kick off a adaptation planning process literally tomorrow in San Diego with a tribe. And I still want to work with you to try to develop that data request protocol. So we'll get to that point probably in the next couple months, but excited. Okay, who would like to go next? Thank you, Isabel. Who would like to go next?
I can go. Hi everyone, Kavadat Mubak, Daniel Sustiaga Im Omulik. Good day everyone, my name is Daniel Sustiaga and I'm from the Fort Yuma Kuchan tribe down in Yuma, Arizona. But I currently serve as the program manager for the Indigenous Resilience Center at the University of Arizona under Dr. Carletta Chief.
Okay.
I'm very new to this group. I am onboarding and getting familiar with a lot of the projects and just the different networks that Dr. Chief has been a part of. So I was invited today and I'm just listening in and seeing how, just getting familiar with the group.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And yeah, we had reached out to Dr. Chief because she is certainly doing some interesting work that we'd like to hear more about, either in this venue or at that summit we've been talking about. So thanks for being here. Love to hear more about your work. Actually, is there anything in particular? I guess you're pretty new. Is there anything in particular you all are focused on right now?
Well, as of right now, the Indigenous Resilience Center is really working to spearhead various projects and of course working with tribes and coming up with community-driven solutions to combat climate change within the Southwest, specifically in Arizona. But at this point, we are, as a newer center, we are going to be entering the next phase of tribal consultation to be able to work with tribes and understand really what their needs are, what concerns are, to really drive our work and put an emphasis on where we should be directing our attention.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we have some alignment with some of the work that we're doing with Tribal Climate Health Project and a California Tribal Gap Analysis that we're trying, same thing, trying to understand what some of the needs are, what some of the tribal needs are. So great. I'm glad you're here. There'll be more to talk about. All right. I don't think we got everybody. Oh, who's next?
You can hop in, Angie.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I am Osamu. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Tribal Climate Change Program Policy Specialist with the California State Department of Public Health, or CDPH. And my background is as an environmental planner with a focus on adaptation planning. And I've been with CDPH for about the past 6 months on the climate change and health equity team, giving technical assistance to 2 and now 3 tribes with climate and health related planning. And have been working pretty closely with Paula Band and with Angie on where we're allocating the technical assistance and plans for the future. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Glad you're here. Is that everybody? I think that was everybody. Oh, Tom, of course. I've been staring at you. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm Thomas Gates. I am an anthropologist and I currently work for the California Energy Commission. I was their Cultural Resources Unit Supervisor I was their tribal liaison. Now I am their tribal advisor, as I am gaining ground on my pending retirement, which I'm very excited about. And I currently live up in northern Mendocino County in California. I'm a land manager on my family's estate. So after a career with tribes spanning, I don't know, 30, 40 years, to actually be able to step away from the paper and the computer and actually manage some land is a very exciting idea to me. And it's a significant chunk of land that I think I could make a difference with. So that's where I'm heading. In the meantime, in the last couple of months of my employment as a state employee, I am mentoring the new tribal liaison, Katrina Lenny Koenig, which I think might have come into some of this, maybe the last meeting.
Yeah.
And you'll see more of her going forward. And so I think there are, so that's, and I used to, before working at the state, I was a consultant. And then before that, I spent 18 years as the historic preservation officer at the Yurok tribe up in Northwest California along the Klamath River. And then I've had a career before that, 10 years of doing watershed restoration and fishery restoration for the U.S. Forest Service. I think in terms of projects or things I'm working on, there's the gap analysis. Angie, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Angie's one of the experts, Angie and Josh. I'm a senior advisor to that. And actually it was originally Josh and my idea to do this. So Angie, I'll leave that to you to talk about. So there's a gap analysis for energy and climate change for California tribes. Second thing, which I'm not going to steal the thunder on, and I'll let Katrina, and maybe at some point, Katrina could make a presentation. We've got $5 million from state to fund tribes to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into the 5th climate change assessment that we're working on. And so these grants, we've got a draft concept, and we've got to take it out to tribal consultation. We've got to form an advisory committee. There's multiple agencies, and the Energy Commission was successful in getting the funds together to fund tribes to integrate into that. And that's really where Katrina is going to take off. And we'd probably be in a place in a month or two to start making some presentations here and getting the word out. And so that's a very exciting thing that I think Katrina will talk about later. I think the thing that I want to put in people's minds today, it's the other thing that I've got to do before I retire. So it's coming down the wire. I'm counting the days. I think I've got 52 days left now, given today, is I'm responsible to finish a cultural landscape document. And the thing I want to put in your mind today is you have tribes, you have climate change, you have related health issues across the board. Then there's this thing called cultural resources. It's this weird thing over here. And when we think about cultural resources, we think about archaeology, which, yeah, that's basically the problem, that the archaeologists hijacked historic preservation and cultural resources a long time ago. And they sort of ruled the roost on cultural resources. And that's why archaeology is what we think about when we say cultural resources. The next thing that we think about when we talk about cultural resources is old buildings. And okay, that's not quite tribal, although tribes have old buildings. I want to talk about cultural landscapes. And that's, I think, the bridge between cultural resources and climate change. Mm-hmm. So I'm responsible to write a cultural landscape document and finish it before I retire. And it's in regards to a cultural landscape out in the desert of California, a place called Chuckwalla Valley, very large place. And this cultural landscape is one place where cultural resources actually can accommodate tribes from their point of view and their values. Certainly tribes value archaeology, I get that, but this is a broader thing. Here's the issue. Out in California, we're putting in lots of solar facilities because that's a way to combat climate change. We all know this. So what happens, though, is when they go out there, they rip up thousands of acres of desert. And we might think, desert, who cares? Sand, rocks, whatever. No, that a lot of this stuff that's being ripped up, it's like, for example, mesquite groves. And if we talk about food resiliency or having enough food as we go through climate change, mesquite, for example, is this highly nutritious legume bean that grows by the thousands of trees across this acreage. And the problem is if you give it to the biologists to analyze, they're going to just simply say, it's not rare, it's not threatened, it's not listed. There's millions of these trees. Let's rip out 3,000 acres. Don't even evaluate it. From a cultural landscape point of view, those are groves that, if they were properly managed, would feed thousands of people without the need for water and irrigation. This is a very viable plant species. And so in doing a cultural landscape, what you get in that analysis, beyond just a voice to say, let's think about this, let's protect these trees, let's mitigate for these trees so that we have a future food source, and certainly a Native American food source. But cultural landscapes, they will connect everything. It's an ecological way of thinking about cultural resources. It connects everything from religion and view sheds and the cosmos, all the way down to the archaeology and the lithics and trail systems and the groves where things were harvested or managed, to hunting and gathering, to quarry sites. The whole thing comes into play. And so this is a document I'm trying to write and finish before I retire. Where we are with this is the BLM, which has a lot of these lands, has rejected this idea of cultural landscapes for the longest time. They have said there's no such thing. They're wrong. They're just simply wrong. It is a type of historic property, and everyone's told them that. We've just won a battle with the BLM. They made some mistakes, perhaps made some lies to their secretary, who, as you guys know, is Native American. We got them on the hot seat, and they have now just conceded the fact that, well, maybe there are cultural landscapes after all. And they're now being required to survey upwards of around 10 million acres of their lands in the California desert and document cultural landscapes from a tribal point of view. That just happened last month.
Whoa.
So this is going to be huge.
From a tribal point of view, meaning what tribes know from traditional ecological knowledge, and taking into account a more tribal approach, what tribes think of as a time scale, what historical really means, right?
Yep. And that's huge. And they're going to have to do that for the entire, what's called the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, which covers millions of acres. And there's something like 34 affiliated tribes with this planning area. So that has now been wrapped into their historic preservation programmatic agreement, which is a legally binding document. And the California SHPO was successful in negotiating that. And so what I'm sitting on is the precursor study that then I will complete at the Energy Commission, provide to the tribes, and then that becomes the background for doing this and expanding this concept. So that's something I'm working on. Very excited. Sorry, it took a lot of time to get to that, but that's really what's on my mind today.
Well, it's the other big data gap, I think, in my mind. I mean, I think from the tribes I get to work with, I hear that all the time, that there's an interest in having more of that information. And if the information does exist, there's no trust in it because it didn't incorporate the knowledge that the tribes have. So that, I mean, that's going to be it. So it sounds like your survey or your report, and then there's going to be lots of survey, and then there's going to be data, and then there's going to be a need to do something with that data and make it accessible. So like that might be years down the line, but the fact that it's starting, it's making me think, wow, like eventually we'll actually have access to it.
Yep. And then the BLM, when they go siting future energy facilities, will have to take that into consideration. They will have to assess effects against this. And if they're going to go forward, they're going to have to mitigate those effects.
And then it gets really interesting with climate change and attribution, because if we're extending the time frame way back, what we're really looking at is all impact of settlement, and then how do you differentiate that versus and urbanization versus what's happening with climate change.
And in the area of the technology that is going to supposedly help us combat climate change. So there's a contradiction there as well.
Yeah, right. Okay, so interesting. Anybody else have questions for Tom?
Is there somewhere we can read about that decision about BLM policy?
I'm looking at that. Right now, it's a requirement to amend the current programmatic agreement. So for now, I don't know if they've actually done that amendment. That was just negotiated. They probably now have to negotiate that amendment. They have to go back out and consult with tribes. So that's probably preliminary. What you could do is simply go to the BLM website and search for the word DRECP, or the acronym DRECP, or Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. Look at what that is. It's huge. Look at what the area it covers, from Bishop to Death Valley, down to Yuma, and over to San Diego County, the eastern side of San Diego. It's a huge area. Google that. And then also, if you really want to drill into it, look at the current programmatic agreement, the Section 106, National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106, programmatic agreement, which will be online, and see what that currently says. That's what they have to amend.
Whew. Well, we have this recorded in case anybody didn't get all those notes down, and so thank you. Thanks, Tom. Claudia, I see you've arrived also. Do you want to say a quick hello? And we're just chatting about related work. Anything interesting that you want to share with folks?
Sure. Yeah, sorry to be late. I know sometimes this overlaps with my staff science team meeting, so but it ended early today, so glad to be here. So I'm from the CDC Climate Health Program, and updates, I mean, we're all looking at the budget drafts right now that just came out this morning, if anyone's looking at those. Yeah, the federal budget for FY22. We're a little disappointed in the climate health program. We are keeping level funding, but the increases that were in previous drafts didn't happen. So a little disappointed over here, but we're chugging along. And we have a few products that have come out in the last few months, and I can drop those in the chat, but one is kind of a story map on climate change and air quality. Story map is something that ArcGIS does, and it's a useful communication tool that we like to use. It's, interactive data. The other thing is we recently published a guidance document for immunologists and allergists on how to talk with your patients about climate change, as we're seeing changes in pollen seasons with climate change, and I'll drop that in the chat. And we're ramping up at CDC for the heat season, getting communications ready and looking at updating our heat and health tracker, which I've presented to you all on. The main updates are going to be, we have on there right now National Syndromic Surveillance Program information on heat-related illness in a weekly format. We're going to move that to a daily, and that will launch sometime in late May, early June. The other thing is we have a heat risk monthly forecast. We're also going to put in a seasonal forecast, which is a 3-month time period on there. So I'll drop a link to our heat and health tracker for anybody that's interested. Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on over there.
Thank you, Claudia. Really appreciate it. By the way, I've been thinking more about, you sent me an email about the summit and I have some ideas, so I'm going to email you back.
I have a question, Claudia.
Yeah.
One of the things that, I don't hold my breath that this is instantly going to happen, but we're interested in some of the surveillance of things other than heat-related illness. And typically our data is like years old, of course. We have daily data only in the event of an actual heat event. But I'm kind of interested in any guidance or on coding so that we could look over time to see, are we having increases in chronic kidney disease? And, you know, it's like, well, we do a lot of work with a lot of ICD-10 coding conditions and indicators, but sometimes there's just not a whole lot on what should we be looking for. And in fact, I did find one paper with some studies, but it was all ICD-9 coding.
Yep.
And it's hard to translate that over. It's like, should we look at what is just chronic kidney disease? Should it be these extra things? You know, is there anything out there that CDC has that could provide? What other things could we be looking at in the context of climate related impacts? I mean, the obvious is heat, right? But
yeah,
and we look at air quality and asthma, ED discharge all the time, right? That's very, you know, we have fires, and of course that's a top of it. So what else could we look for? What rise in, say, even mental health? Because we get a lot of questions about it that we really cannot answer with our data, other than to say, yeah, that's probably going to be a problem, but we don't have, we want something authoritative to sort of hang our hat on, not vague guesses.
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts on that. Our environmental public health tracking program, they have these kind of content work groups that have developed ICD-10 codes and some 9 codes, but we've tried to transition those for different climate stressors. So I don't have off the top of my head which topics they've done that for, these kind of definitions, but I'll check on that and send that back out to the group. And I will say that's something that we've talked about doing, is kind of a ICD-10 toolkit for climate and health that, yeah, we would really like to see happen. Oh, sorry, are you saying something?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that would be awesome. That's exactly what we'd like, you know.
Well, that's good to hear, to kind of back up my case that I thought that was a good idea. So I can say, oh no, our stakeholders have also said that.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is like one of the things that comes up with our public health officer is, what's the big effect? It's every year I get the question about the heat illness and injury, and but what she really wants to know is what's everything we should be looking at, and can I have it now? And
definitely something on the radar for us and our grantees, because we fund state and local health departments to do climate and health work, and they will sometimes get together and kind of tackle these questions together and try to figure out. But to your point, you know, it'd be nice to have like that toolkit or something that's like, this is, you know, the recommended guidance on it, rather than people getting together and coming up with what they think is the best methods. So I'll look into that because I don't have it off the top of my head, but and I'll definitely follow up with and send it to you, Angie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We should do this round robin longer thing more often. This is all very interesting. I wanted to mention 2 things. So I have been in a couple of meetings with federal government folk lately, and I'm learning about a federal climate atlas that seems to be underway. And I don't know enough about it. I wonder if anybody else has heard about it, but I know that Canada has one. It's maybe a thing that is going to be like the repository of climate data for the United States, and maybe that they're calling it the atlas. It's connected to another kind of federal project more about land conservation, but it's out there, and it's making me think about interventions, or sort of where do we position ourselves to be helpful, not just on, you know, individual tools, but at a higher level, so that the things that we know, what we've been learning through this group and all of our work can be like suggestions, advising can be provided at the right scale with the folks that are trying to design, you know, a big solution. The other thing I'm hearing is that I'm meeting with folks from CEQ, Council on Environmental Quality. It's like the federal sustainability folks, and climate data is a big one for them. They're going to maybe even establish a work group. So it just seems like there are going to be these opportunities to really be, you know, participate or have some place to share our knowledge. So I want us all to kind of be looking out for those and sharing those opportunities, because let's catalog them and see where we might be able to participate. And then let's see, the last thing I want to mention is I've found myself in lots of forums lately, like including the US Global Change Research Projects had a health chapter workshop. I don't know if anybody else participated, but I showed up, and there and a few other places are mentioning. I'm wondering if we should start looking more closely at neurological effects associated with climate change. So not just mental health. So like it took a while for everybody to leap onto mental health being a big deal. Cool, there's some indicators, but almost everybody's looking at that purely from like a trauma perspective, which is super important. But my question is, what about the physiological, neurological effects associated with things like infectious disease? And we know that there's a correlation there. There's research on it, it's preliminary, but I feel like there's a silent void associated with what tends to be like a very invisible suffering, or folks are experiencing these neurological effects, and I think will happen more just because we know the projections for these diseases that cause neurological effects or air pollution that causes neurological effects are going to increase. So anyway,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I actually think I got some attention with the next national climate assessment. We'll see if it makes it in. Okay, well, that was cool and fun. I wanted to share with you a little bit of just a quick update on some stuff that we got that we're getting out of our Southern California data development project. So you might remember that the Tribal Climate Health Project is on its second of a 3-phase so far funded program. It's funded by the BIA. We are trying to do a better job of collecting data for tribes and giving access to data. So that's actually how we are facilitating this group, is through that funding. But we just got done compiling a first round of data for 5 tribes actually in Riverside. That was like our second wave of like a cohort supporting tribes. And so we're providing them a lot of data. We've gathered a lot of data, and now we're asking them to tell us how meaningful that data is, what else they need, what's their highest priority, where are the gaps. Anyways, I just thought I would share some cool stuff that we have access to now. And these are coming from a new round of data requests that we did with CTEC. So we got number of valley case fevers, but you can see this is California. It's still interesting. At least it's split up by population. So we know AIAN, but it's not location specific, but this is as good as we could get. We have likely has had serious psychological distress in the past year, at least it's in Southern California counties. Again, AIAN population shown. Why the big difference in 2020? That's interesting, right? Wouldn't you have expected everybody's mental health to take a crash in 2020? Why are we seeing just AIAN populations be different there? That's super interesting to me. We got a number of power outage incidents, which is, I always struggle to get this. And this is by county. So interesting. I would use this in an adaptation plan for sure, because we know there are, not just because power outages are devastating all around, but also have health related impacts for people that are electricity dependent. They have electricity dependent medical equipment. So that was cool, that was actually accessible. And this other one, the Indian Health Service Sanitation Deficiency System, shows the percentage of American Indians and Alaska Natives in California living with adequate water, sewage, or sewer and solid waste systems has increased since 2014. So I guess that's just interesting. It's not giving me more than just a California number, but it's showing me a trend in terms of sanitation deficiencies. So getting better apparently, but so I don't know, any questions about that? I just wanted to share some cool new data sets because that's what we do here.
I have a question on the valley fever cases.
Yeah.
So has there been any newer data reported since the pandemic, like 2020, 21?
This is as much as I get, and I have to go back to the data set that we received. All of CTEC's data comes from other studies, and they may just have it through 2019 right now. So I was just curious.
we're seeing a lot of the same thing here in Southern Arizona because valley fever, for a number of different impacts, are causes that are seeing a difference in rates over the past years. But there's also a lot of confusion because valley fever symptoms are very similar to COVID-19 symptoms. And so if you didn't know about valley fever symptoms, were you tested for valley fever? So that's where we saw a little bit of the discrepancies there in a lot of what was reported and what wasn't.
Yeah, and valley fever is one of the climate change indicators we have in the big report as well. So
Yeah. Are you, Laurie, do you associate it with, what are the exposures it's associated with for you? We talk about it with respect to heat and drought.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is really cool to hear. I'm just gonna throw this out there. It makes me happy just because I was diagnosed with valley fever in 2021. And so seeing this is like, makes me just excited to know that this is now being tracked. And amongst tribal communities, when I would have conversations, my background is in public health. So when I look at and talk about disparities and we talk about things like this specific disease, a lot of the communities that I have worked with had never heard of valley fever, and they were just like, what is this? And it's like, oh my gosh, it's something that definitely is important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it sounds like a horrible disease. I'm sorry you had to deal with it. I hope you're better.
Yeah, it's pretty rough, but it's good to see that this is in there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Daniel because none of the tribes that we worked with mentioned this as an impact they were seeing. We were actually kind of hoping that somebody would mention it. So I like seeing this kind of brought to light with tribal communities so that they know what to watch out for too.
You know, we talked about it a lot, and I think it's because, you know, so much of our focus has been on Southern California, and we do hear about it there. So, you know, San Diego tried to mention it, and I think they've heard from each other that some of their members have had it. And so they're like, whoa, what's that? That and hantavirus, which are things that I hadn't really had my finger on before, but they exist and they're growing.
Hey, Angie, isn't valley fever linked to ground disturbance and particularly agriculture?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking like parts of like Arizona, Imperial, where there's, you know, Central Valley, which is, I think, where it first kind of came up in the 70s or 60s was, you know, it's all ag lands. And then, of course, once it gets disturbed, it moves with the air.
Right. So wind could be, you know, increases in wind could be an exposure, even wildfire could be exposure. We're associated with it. Yeah, I forget all the places we have it in the Easy tool. So it's an indicator that's associated for us with impacts with several exposures. And actually, we talked about it too. I just did a tribal transportation adaptation plan, and we talked about it because one of the impacts that was raised was dust and road dust. You know, an increase in road dust and yeah, so fungal spores. Basically, we're talking about fungal spores being released. All right, I'm gonna take us into our little conversation about just where we're at as a group, and I'm just kind of interested in folks' thoughts. So sorry for all the text, but this is sort of what we talked about before we first got started. We talked about what are our goals, what are our objectives, and then we'll just kind of talk about what progress we've made and what next steps we want to focus on. So let me do a little quick overview, and then I want to hear your thoughts. So the two main goals that we have really focused on are to improve tribal climate and health resilience data access for tribes. And then the second one being foster collaborative tribal resilience data access solutions. And so I think we're actually doing a very good job on number one, and have seen some percolations of things happening under number two here. And we also talked about supporting better protection of tribal data. And to me, that's felt like more of a value than like a separate objective. So it's still trying to figure out where that fits in. It's important, especially when we talk about data access. So we gave ourselves some kind of objectives, and I guess the things, you know, the progress as I see it has been, we've had this is our 10th meeting. 7 of those meetings have hosted conversations with data set or tool makers, and some of you have done that, so thank you. So we kind of dove in on 7 different data solutions. Those have been county, university, tribal led, federal, state. So I really appreciate everybody's participation in that, and I think that has been part of the work. We've been looking across data sets to understand where the gaps generally are, and we sort of do live feedback. So for the folks that have come, they're receiving feedback on where tribes may want to see other types of data or other ways to present it. And so sort of real time progress, I would say. And oftentimes we hear during or after that has made a real impact with some agents. So I know, like, Claudia, you've been amazing. You wanted more information, more feedback to help drive what you're doing at CDC. Noah's been the same. In other cases, we see, like University of Washington, we see really good examples of how they're doing something that others are struggling to do, like get tribal boundaries, do data by tribal boundaries. So to me, it's been a really interesting thing. And so it's helping us, I think, identify opportunities and gaps, and like I said, providing guidance during and after. And a lot of the information, when we see it, if it's new to the Tribal Climate Health Project, we're just grabbing it and we are looking through it, and we're seeing where we can pull new indicators into our EASY tool. And the EASY tool, again, has been built to be this umbrella where we know that tribes, even though there's lots of data available, it's very fragmented, it's difficult to navigate. And so where we find good stuff, we squirrel it away in our little EASY tool so that other folks can find it. So I want to stop actually at that point and see how else are you guys feeling about how well we're doing on that first goal and against our objectives? Are you happy with how that's going? What else should we be doing?
One of the other things I found really helpful is like after Isabel's presentation and seeing how helpful the San Diego County was willing to be. I was in a meeting with another agency that I won't name that was like, it's impossible. Nobody can give that data. And I was like, well, San Diego County will work with you. And so in that way, they're like, okay, well, I guess maybe we will work with you then. So that kind of thing is helpful.
Yeah, like the knowledge exchange between us, all of us out there doing this work in different ways, I think has been really helpful.
Yeah, and it lets you pressure other people to share data and have them let you access data as well.
Right.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Also, they can compete. Sometimes you get them to participate just by like, what do you mean they didn't do it? We are going to do that too.
Yeah, so I think that's part of what we wanted to do, was to influence the agencies and data makers and the owners of these tools to serve tribes better individually. And then there's this sort of more macro. How do we do, should we take it up a notch and try to influence things at a higher level? Okay, sorry, you were going to say something.
I was just wondering if, from your past experiences, or I guess this process, if you feel like strategies to pursue to kind of open up that county to tribe data sharing should really be focused at the tribes themselves and kind of providing like, a process or kind of a protocol for how to request data, or if you think it could be facilitated by, the state working with counties and giving guidance on how to release data and what data they should have ready to go. I guess that's just my sense, is like how trying to understand, which pathway you see as maybe more viable or both. And then similarly, I guess I'm currently working on a data request to some tribal health clinics, and was wondering if there are strategies for tribes that are interested in, doing plans that cite community health statistics for them to actually make contact and try to get that climate change related health data. And I think I heard Isabel saying, part of that might be that maybe they don't even know how to code climate-related health incidents. So
Yeah, so we find that a lot where somebody will come. I mean, we field requests where somebody will have say an indicator of interest, and they don't really know I mean, we're not all expert coders by any means. We look for standards, but sometimes people will ask, well, how do I look at brain trauma? And then it's like, well, what do you got? Or how do I look at, long-term effects of COVID, which we know is coming, right? We know that everyone's going to want to know that. Or maternal complications, not death, but morbidity. And then we kind of work with them to flesh out a question. But yeah, I think it would be really, we are always willing to work with whatever group Dr. Wooten has named as part of our strategic plan, actually. And actually, I think that's even higher. It might be at the entire agency level, that tribal residents are a priority, along with LGBT and some other groups, that there are people that we want our residents to reach out and be reached out to, right? So I agree. Sometimes we don't know how to help without people asking. We don't just like foist everything on people. So we go where there's an interest, but it's really great if somebody wanted to come to us, or a group, really, saying, hey, could you either help us with data analysis, or do you have this kind of data and can you share it with us? And they don't have a procedure for doing it. Typically, we hear very informally, and then we work it into something. But I don't know what other agents. We do collaborate at time with CTEC. They have a lot of guidance on data resources and how to use it. We try to be guided by them at all times. I know that the tribes can go through them because they are actual data holders. They are the the authorities. And then if they don't have resources, they can reach out to us and say, hey, we don't want you to really, have all of our data, but could you help us analyze it? Or can you help us come up with, can you map something for us? Yep, we sure can. Yeah. I don't know if other agencies are willing to do that, but we certainly are.
And on your question for me, I think the bigger need is probably for the state to communicate with the counties about it. And then I think if there is a process in place, or if the counties find themselves now having more to offer to tribes, like San Diego is really working on, then I think the outreach then is the next step with tribes, to let tribes know actually counties do have something to offer to you. But, I think if you did it the other way around, there'd just be a lot of tribes going to counties and counties being like, we don't know how to help you.
I'm hearing you say it might be more about helping counties, at least from our position in our team, helping counties record and analyze and share that data with parties, including tribes, but just becoming more proficient at understanding what's a climate-related health impact, or even environmental data that maybe the health program hasn't utilized before.
Yeah, it's like when you do that kind of encouraging, then you in that process, what else do tribes want to know? So what's specific about when tribes come to look for data? What do you want to have ready for them in a different way, potentially? Okay, helpful. And what other comments do people have just on how we're doing on this goal 1? What progress we're making? What ideas you have for how we could do things better? Do you want to keep hearing from speakers? Do you like doing that? I mean, I always like it. I
Yes.
always thinking that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking, who else can you get? It would be great to have someone in from one of the CTECs, actually, or some of the other related agencies. I think that would be great.
Yes. And so much of our focus has been California, but I do want to get folks from around the country as well. But like Lisa, who comes, she comes sometimes. Like, it would be wonderful once she's ready to talk about her vulnerable populations data to hear about that. Laurie, we would love to hear once you're ready to release that report. If you wanted to present, that would be great too. But who else? Who else would you guys like to hear from? You can always suggest it at any time, but it sounds like, yes, more speakers, more tools. And so, throughout the process, I've been sort of noting key themes, like what are we learning as we talk through all these data sets? And so I want to talk about that maybe on the next slide, but I don't want to taint you before I do. And I want to finish what we have on this slide first. Quick conversation about this, identifying opportunities for constructive engagement with state and federal agencies. So like, besides the wonderful folks that we have coming to these calls where engagement's very easy, where are there more formal processes that we could potentially participate in, either through public comment or by being a sitting member of an advisory group? Are you all aware of any of these things? And does that sound constructive to you? I feel like that's where I want to go next. I want to kind of elevate it up, like get to a more systems level with it, because we could go spend the next 20 years of our lives trying to go tool by tool and encouraging improvements. But how do we raise this up so that a higher level solution, these themes that we're aware of, these gaps and needs, can be shared at a scale where they can be more broadly applied, I guess is what I'm hoping for. So I actually think OPR, so for California, it would be probably what OPR is working on, ICARP and that whole team. And obviously CDPH, we're working with you guys. And at the federal level, I guess I have hope about this climate atlas and the data work group. That sounds like this climate science data work group that's forming. So I guess that's what I'm looking for. And I just want to kind of be there, any of us to share this information. But if you hear of something that you think, hey, we should really try to have a seat on that, or try to submit what we know to that, just let us know. You can send me an email anytime, bring it to this group, let's talk about it. That's what I'm looking for.
Hey, Angie, you might want to double back with Nuantara at OPR. She is the lead staff person in the state for the 5th climate change assessment. There's multiple advisory committees that they are thinking about. We're trying to form to advise. So I'm sure you could plug in somewhere. They are doing this. There's this idea that they're going to have a tribal advisory for the grants that I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And the question pending right now is that going to be strictly tribal members, representatives of tribal governments? Are they going to allow tribal serving NGOs to sit on that advisory committee? Or are they going to allow simply academics and others, whether Native American or not, who have expertise with tribes? So whether it's with that tribal advisory that they're trying to tinker with the ideas right now, or some of the other advisories that advise across the climate change assessment. Now that's just California. I realize you're wanting something more national, but that's happening right now.
Cool. All right. Yeah. I think that's a really good suggestion. And I'm realizing I actually kept you over, and I thought we were going to get through this meeting early. Of course, never. I'm sorry to keep you over. And in fact, so what I have here, we'll just save till next time. Hopefully I'll bring in a speaker, but we can have this conversation about sort of key themes. Like what have we learned so far? And what do we really want to highlight? If some of you ever cared about hearing our ideas, what would we tell them? So let's save this. I will send this out. I'll follow up. You guys will have access to the recording and the materials, but we'll save this conversation until next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all. We'll see you next time.